Okay, everybody, welcome to day 2 of workshop 2 of the Civic Working Group. We have more fabulous things for you to discuss and work out today. We'll continue working with our super cool software and come up with our plans that are not only great uses for our building and site for Santa Monica, but also pencil out financially. Once again, for those who weren't here yesterday, the bathrooms are in the hall behind this wall here. And when you're ready to go, you can get a parking validation at the table back there. And these people here are still the Civic Working Group, and let's have a roll call.
Not here yet.
Phil Ross.
Here.
Fred Denny.
Here.
Nina Fresco. Here. Frank Gruber.
Here.
Yao Katagiri. Here. Philippa Roscoe.
Here.
Jody Summers. Here. Kerry Upton.
Here.
Okay, beautiful. And now I turn it over to John Alschuler from HR&A.
Anyway, good morning, and again, thanks everybody for coming back. And just so we can get ourselves organized, just to get started, can I just have a show of hands of people who weren't here yesterday? Now, if all of you could consolidate yourself at table 10. Now, you're at table 10. You've already done it. Fabulous. So we have a couple of outliers because everybody got a head start with you on the software and the program. And it's going to be easier and more fun for you if somebody sort of walks you through and gets you introduced to the exercise. So it's going to be more fun and more interesting for all of you if you start at table 10, and we'll work with you and move our way forward. Now, good. So, get myself a little close to this so people can hear it. Okay, let me just, we're handing out technology here. Okay, so what we're going to do today, let's go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to do 4 things today. The first thing we're going to do is very quickly and very efficiently, we're going to summarize what happened yesterday. For those of you who weren't here, the very large, interesting, very engaged group of people spent some time learning about the civic site, the choices for public use there in terms of arts and cultural and park, the cost implications of that, and then looked also at ways in which some of those costs might be defrayed by bringing some sorts of private development on the site, hotel, residential, office. People made a series of choices, and then they came up with a sort of first cut, deliberately preliminary and not final financial tabulation to sort of see where they were about how much money had they spent on public goods, art, culture, park, and then how much money had they earned from a series of private land uses. So we'll summarize that. Now, the second bullet is sort of maybe somewhat out of order, but interestingly, one of the most surprising things from yesterday is many of you didn't use all the land. You left about a third of the site, well, on average, and since no particular human being is an average, it's somewhat distorted, but on average, the group left about a third of the site vacant. So, I would hope none of us believe when we do this, you'll leave a third of it a parking lot. That would look a little silly. It's not really what we're trying to do here. So I would urge you to fill the site up. Use all the land. And pick a choice and fill it up. You got 6 acres, use it. Now, that was a surprise to me. It wasn't a surprise to me that, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to comment on that because, the
software had a limited range of options, and because there's that comment section at the end, I think some of us, like me, didn't fill the land up with the available options, thinking some of the things in the comment section would be filled in. So for people who weren't here today, or for people who maybe did the same thing, you know, I think we were hoping that options that weren't.
Okay, well, that's a good, that's a really good point. And if you've deliberately left land vacant for something else, then write that down so we know that. And that'll be a helpful finding for all of us. Now, the second may or may not have been an intent, but it's something people need to think very carefully about, which is, as we'll show you in a minute, there's a pretty meaningful gap between the amount of money people chose to spend and the amount of money people chose to earn. And again, that's a policy choice. You know, there's no compulsion on you. You're not going to get a bad star near your name if it turns out that you didn't balance the budget. But I think the working group and others would like to see you try. and if you can't, well, you can't. You know, you're not going to do something you don't believe in. But on the other hand, if you can balance the budget, it would be a really good thing. So try that, and then at the end there's a survey. So, and we hope you'd fill that out, because we'll learn a lot about what you think about what you did, and it'll help us with the future of the Civic. So now let me take a couple of minutes and summarize for you what we learned from yesterday. And so this is the first thing that I've already mentioned. You've got 6.4 available acres, and the average of you, whoever that happens to be, only used 4.6. So unless you made a conscious choice to leave room open for something else, fill it up. You know, something's going to get used, and it's going to distort the results if you've done it unintentionally, because we're probably going to assume if you didn't fill it up, it's going to be a park or something like that, and that costs money. Since I think we believe the option of just doing nothing is probably not a great option. So now the second thing you did is you didn't fully park it. Now, part of this may be you chose uses that don't need parking. This one, frankly, doesn't concern me all that much. But just check and be sure that you've got the parking that you need for what you have. Now we get to the things which I think to me are more interesting. There was not unanimity, not an overwhelming majority, but pretty clear that the sentiment favored what we called Civic Option 1, a regional entertainment arts complex that had a range from Broadway shows to community events in a restored Civic Auditorium. And that may have been because that's the kind of place people wanted. It may have been because people here were thinking both about arts and about money at the same time, because some of you may have recognized that this was the only one that didn't create an operating deficit. But it was pretty clear that that was where the predominance of opinion went. And only 17% of the people who came wanted a building focused on just the arts. And here's the actual numbers. Of the roughly 80 people we had voting, about half of you chose the entertainment arts complex. Whoops, go back. And only 14% chose the community arts and cultural campus. Maybe people said those resources exist elsewhere in Santa Monica. It may have been a financial decision. It may have been that was really the kind of vision people have for a vibrant local arts center. People are the judges of their own motives, but this is how you voted. So let's go to the next slide. Now, we also gave people a set of choices about other public land uses, and just as I found this actually quite interesting. There was a strong preference for not-for-profit uses that were performance-related, as opposed to museums. People thought, clubs, rehearsal space, small arts venues devoted to performance. So I think I may be, putting words in people's mouths, but the sense is that this should be a cultural, active, entertainment, performance-oriented environment here. And that was pretty strong. We gave a series of park options. While there were some people who wanted a 4-acre park, pretty evenly split between a 1 and a 2-acre park. If we go to the actual data, you can see it here. They're very, very, like maybe one person, 2 people may have chosen the 4.5-acre park. Not many people wanted a fine art museum or an experimental museum. Some, but 10 out of the 80 people that were here. As we move down, some sentiment for the half-acre park or the sports field, but stronger sentiment, I'd say, about half the people here thought a 1 or a 2-acre park was where the energy was. Yes?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment about that because it was a little confusing to my two-person group. In the beginning and looking at all the different various options for the park, that when you looked at, some of these 1 and 2-acre parks, you're looking at a design probably or concept that's so expensive, like Tonga Park, versus the sports field, which takes up more space and is the least expensive. So as far as capital investment goes, if you go for a 2-acre park, you're probably, I don't know what the difference in the capital cost was for a 2-acre park versus a sports field.
Well, a 2-acre park will be more expensive than a sports field, but, you picked a very capital-intensive vision at Tonga Park.
Right, well,
Yeah.
you needed to refer to that
Yeah,
booklet,
yeah.
and I'm not sure if
Yeah.
anybody, we weren't
Oh.
referring to that booklet until I.
Right. The sports field is certainly cheaper. On the other hand, the designs, when we gave you a number, when people actually get to design it, people can make a set of choices about how capital intensive they want it to be. Bertha?
John, we did a survey in the city where 95% of the population wanted a cultural center, not a running field. And it was very difficult. I had to ask Dial, where would I put that idea in? I had to choose the place where these 3 suggestions are. And it was in number 2.
Right.
And so there was no clarity.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think because there was no clarity, people went into all kinds of other places.
yeah.
And the idea of the exercise or the activity also was confusing. So I think that the way this was presented was not clear enough. It may have been better to say an archival museum,
Yeah.
a dance studio,
It-
something like that, where people can.
Yeah. That may be the case. I mean, we tried hard to be clear, and there are only so many choices you can put into a given piece of software. But as I think a couple of comments made, this was a exercise in the first series of choices, and that was the intent. Now, whenever you do that, you lose subtlety, and you leave ideas off the table. So, we're not trying to design this today. We're not trying to make a decision today. We're trying to set general direction. And, like, for example, I look at this and I say, okay, there was stronger sentiment around active performance-related activity in a park, but not a 4-acre park. And maybe it's 2 acres, maybe it's 1 acre. That's the kind of thing that'll get worked out when we go through much more complicated and integral design work. But I think this is, and again, this isn't a decision-making tool. Decisions will get made, first there'll be a recommendation by the working group, and then your council. And it'll get refined and embellished as we go through it. But this is just the general direction that came out of the room yesterday. So then when we get to the private land uses, there was a pretty strong sense that of all the private land uses that were going to earn money, the one that received more support was a boutique hotel. And you know, I'm not advocating for it. This is reporting. You know, yeah. No messengers get shot this morning. Right? I'm saying you can argue with your fellow citizens at the table. That's good. I'm just here reporting. And there was clearly virtually no desire for residential or office. And let's look at the actual numbers. As you can see, and it's a little complicated, Remy reminded me too, if you look at the colors of the bars, they mean something here. So for example, a pretty significant number of people wanted 3 cafes or small restaurants. That's the gray bar. And then some people wanted 2. People didn't want 5, for example. So they want more than 1. At least the majority of people wanted restaurants, wanted more than 1. And you combine the top 2, because you have cafes and small restaurants, storefront restaurants, a fair amount of energy around restaurants. A little less than half of the people wanted the hotel, but of the things which produce revenue, that got the most support. And just skipping down, you see very little energy for either a larger office building or a meaningful residential structure. Now, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that changes today, because as we'll get to the end, you as a group left a pretty large financial deficit. And you can either decide, okay, you're going to leave a large financial deficit, or you're going to choose as citizens to try and fill it. And the only way you're going to be able to fill it is by choosing one or more of these uses to fill your deficit. So this was, and we were very clear yesterday that your job wasn't to solve everything. Yesterday was pass 1. And the reason why we bifurcated this into 2 sessions is day 1 was just to get a start, and then day 2 today is designed to focus in a little bit more and see whether or not you are comfortable producing something that's reasonably in balance. And if you're not, that's an important finding to say to the City Council, that the vision of people here in this site is that it can't be self-financing. So we're not telling you you have to. If you can't, that in and of itself is an important finding. Now this, you know, not surprisingly, there was a wish or a strong desire for public funding and philanthropy. So let's look at the numbers here. Now, about 30 people, a little less, chose getting revenue bond from a ticket tax. Now, we weren't clear enough with you. What's interesting here is there were 10 people who chose option 1, the commercial theater, but didn't choose the revenue bond. Now, you're only allowed to choose the revenue bond if you chose option 1, because there was no ticket tax on the second 2 options, because they're not commercial. So, for those of you today who choose option 1, ask yourself very explicitly, would you like to see a ticket tax? Because you have that option. And either there were 10 people yesterday who had the option of choosing the ticket tax, and either we weren't clear enough to let them know that they had the right then to add it. They chose option 1, the commercial theater, and weren't clear enough that they then had the ability to add a ticket tax, or for some reason they chose not to have one. So if you choose option 1, please make a conscious choice one way or the other. You have the right to then create the ticket tax. Clearly, a very large number of people would like to see a capital fundraising campaign. And I think one of the questions the Civic Working Group, the Council, and others are going to have to ask is just how realistic is that, and at what level of capital. You know, there's an uneven history of raising capital funds for what are in many ways fundamentally public projects. It's doable. It has its risks. And then more than half the people here would like to see the city council authorize a general obligation bond. So let's talk a little bit now about the financial gap. Okay, these are the numbers on the funding options. As you see, out of 80 people, more than half wanted, this is now operating funding. They wanted to raise money not only for capital, they wanted philanthropy to help close the operating deficit, and they wanted the city to pay $1 million a year out of the general fund to fund ongoing operations. So if we go back one slide, there's a desire for private fundraising for capital, and then private fundraising for actually subsidizing an operating deficit, and then essentially the same thing. A desire for the city council to create an annual funding stream to pay off bonds, and then an annual funding stream to support operations. So let's go to the next page. So, not surprisingly, again, on average, there was about a $45 million gap between the amount of money people wanted to spend and the amount of revenue you chose to generate. Now, some of you may have balanced your budget, some of you may have had a larger gap, but this is the average. So one of the things, again, that we would like you to try and do is to see if we can narrow that gap and get the $45 million gap, which is about, close to half, maybe a little less, of the total capital, remains outstanding. Yes?
John, with all due respect, that $45 million, I chose option one, which is a $93 million capital investment. And I don't see any way to figure out what those comps are to see if that's really an overstatement on how much it would cost to do that. And that leaves me with a $45
Yeah,
million.
no, I realize we're not giving you all the backup for these numbers, but you're going to have to trust us that we've done a significant amount of research on this. We have looked at what the very detailed cost estimates were for the original Nederlander deal. We have looked at comparable facilities around the United States and collected a lot of data about this. And so while these are order of magnitude estimates, no building designs have taken place here, we have very carefully looked at the cost of each of the three options for the Civic and all of the public arts and cultural uses that we're looking at and benchmarked them for comparable facilities around the country. So, we don't have the time to get into the detail here about that, but we're asking you to trust the fact that we've done our homework and that these estimates are solid enough for purposes of today's trade-off game.
Is it going to be 80 million? Is it going to be 100 million? I mean, that's a level of detail that will get sorted out down the road. But just having done this in a number of places, it's much more expensive to retrofit an historic building than it is to build one from scratch. It's just harder, more expensive. And if you make the decision to historically preserve, as this community has, that has very meaningful cost consequences. Secondly, a performance facility is a very expensive thing to build. So I believe very strongly that this is something that, is it 70 million, is it 80 million, is it 90 million? This is going to be a very expensive undertaking, and I don't think the public does itself any good by pretending that it's going to cost less than it will. And this has been gone over.
I'm not saying that at all, and I used to work for building magazines, and I have some experience with looking at, different options of builders that we were going to hire to do things. So for me, it's just helpful to know what the comps are.
Yeah, well, I think what you should do is let us have your name and number. We'll send you the data we have. You can take a look at it. There's no secrets here.
Okay.
And if you're interested in looking at the cost estimates, we're happy to share them with you. It's been looked at 3 or 4 times, not a big spread. Take a look at it and make your own judgment. So, Let's,
Can you give us some relative numbers? You mentioned at 1.70, the $70 million gap. Is that an average or a mean?
that's an interesting question. Mike, is this an average or a mean? It's an average. So it's what, this is the average gap of everybody who participated. And one of the things that'll be interesting to see is whether or not after you spend some more time today, that number can go up, it could stay the same, it can go down. That's up to each of you. Yes, sir.
My capital loss is about $87 million, so my operating generates $13 million a year. So it would only take 5, 6 years to pay off the capital loss on that.
If,
Tax the program.
I don't know how.
I'm not sure quite how you did that, because I'm not sure how we get that kind of an operating surplus. But we'll come by and take a look and see what you did and see if we can learn something from it. 'Cause that seems, it seems like it shouldn't have come out that way. I played the game a couple times. I couldn't figure out how to get that done. So let's go to the next slide. So here's this just shows you what you got. Let's go to the next slide. This shows the same thing. Okay, now, again, let me just remind you, this is something you can do at home for the next couple of weeks, and your friends and neighbors can do it at home. So if you find today insufficient, and you want to keep doing this and keep exploring, we would urge you to do that. So let's go back to just our task. So just to remind everybody, we've got sort of two different processes. We've got our table 10, who's going to start from scratch, and you're a good table, you're smart, you'll catch up in about an hour, don't worry about it, it'll work. And then we have each of the other tables who are going to make an effort to try and refine their work yesterday. Please use all the land. It's just much more helpful for us if you don't leave a third of the site vacant. And again, we're not telling you you have to balance the budget, but it's something that, if it's possible, we would urge you to get as close to that objective as you feel comfortable. Yes, sir.
Just a suggestion for as you refine the model down the line.
Yeah.
I was one of the people who had picked the Center for the Performing Arts because I wanted a guarantee of a certain amount of nonprofit type community-based performances, and I know that we stretch the models to their logical extreme. So one could imagine if the entertainment arts complex is chosen, that the council would still require a portion of, and just wanted to kind of throw in that might change the financing of that and down the line.
I think you're absolutely right, and my memory was that the RFP that led to the Niederlander selection, in fact, did require them to set aside a certain number of days. And if you look at Pasadena and other models, it would be, it's not my judgment, but I'd consider it unimaginable that the city would ever turn the facility over to a private operator and say, you have no public purposes whatsoever. There'll have to be some number of days set aside for not-for-profits, for community use, at discount rates. That has to happen.
So would it be fair then that, at least in the back of our mind, and we think we're balancing it with alternative number one, to some degree there's going to be a small percentage that won't happen?
I think you could assume an alternative number one. There would definitely be an allocation for civic and community uses. And I think in the text it says that. Yeah. Yeah.
It is built in?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's that.
It's just, Michael, it's a relative difference. So
Yeah.
if you pick Civic, what we refer to as Civic 1, there's a relatively smaller component of public use as opposed to Civic 3 where it's, almost exclusively public.
Now, can we have the lights back on, by the way? The slides are done, and it'll be just easier just to see people. Wonderful. You've reemerged. Yes.
I had a quick question and then a quick comment too. On the parking assumption, are you factoring in use by people going to City Hall or
Yes.
government buildings?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
use by Samo High too?
Yes.
Because as a Samo parent, I park
Yes.
there at least once a week
Yes,
during the day or at night.
all of the current commitments from the courthouse, city employees, Samo High, the employees at Santa Monica Place who park here, all that's been factored into the numbers.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Great
And
job.
this is going to be something where since so many of these spaces are going to be allocated to nighttime use, because the peak demand here, the constraint on parking is going to be at 8 o'clock at night, 7:30 at night, 8 in the morning, noon, 5 o'clock. If you've got enough parking to handle, 2,000 people coming to an event, there's going to be surplus parking virtually all day.
Totally, which is great.
Yeah.
And then my quick comment just on, you have said a lot of us left the land or whatever blank. I would respectfully suggest that then the assumption is that people don't want it overdone, they want to keep it open.
Well, then make it park. Make it park. I mean,
And then just make a bigger.
Yeah, make a park. You've got a park option, and if that's what you want, we're not trying to prejudge that. It just, the reason why it's important is one, again, it's not gonna be left a parking lot, right? If you don't want too much development, make a bigger park. That's what I would do. You'll make your own choice, but if I were in your shoes, I didn't want to see too much there, I'd just make a bigger park. I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. You could have park and field, yeah. Just fill it up with green. That's an option which is available to you.
But remember that those don't come for free.
Yeah.
Either on the capital side or the operating side.
Right. I'm sorry, what?
It has a huge area of just pure grass. I don't know if you want to call it a park or not, but it doesn't cost anything to grow grass except for Santa Monica water bills.
Right. Yeah. No, I would consider that, if that's the kind of option you want, call it a field, call it one of the larger parks. Yeah, but notionally, it would be, we understand, so. Okay, if everybody could just hang on for 1 or 2 minutes, we'll give you plenty of time to talk, to everybody at the table. Got just a couple of more questions, and then we'll turn it loose.
Louder.
Let's say we get a boutique hotel on the site, and the city is good enough to give us the transient occupancy tax for the operating expenses. Would that perhaps equal that $400,000?
The model already assumes that the city's going to do that. Yeah, we wrote into the program that the revenue from the hotel would include a dedication of all the transit occupancy tax to this particular civic use. So let me just take Frank, and then we'll sort of say, you've got facilitators there, they're highly skilled, ask them a question, Paul, myself, others are around. So let me just take one more question from Frank, and then we'll turn everybody loose.
Yeah, just a comment as a member of the CWG, really going back to some of your earlier issues with the model. Don't worry about it. In other words, that nothing here restricts what happens in the future. It's a tool for people to think about things have to balance out. But the decisions are not going to be made based upon what 80 people said yesterday on some kind of average down. It's not going to be based upon some kind of average down for what 40 people say today. This is a tool that makes people think in a positive, productive way. And there will be a chance to get everything over.
Thanks. An excellent segue. So why don't you all get started, and probably we'll give this an hour or so, but we'll test and see where we are and how people are doing. So everybody could just take a seat, and we'll conclude. First, I just want to say this is the beginning of a process. We're by no means done. Starting on Monday, you'll be able to go to this address, www.santamonicacivic.org, and you can, for those of you that haven't had enough, you can play the game again. But more importantly, I really, really hope you tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell other citizens. The more people we get, the better the whole process is. And the whole purpose of the Civic Working Group and the council wanted was to get as many of you and as many of your fellow citizens engaged. So please, please use word of mouth, tell other people to join, and let's expand the number of people who participate. So now what I want to do is sort of go back over what I showed you before and summarize what you did today. So Mike, if you can just bring it up. This is what Mike's been doing is he built this software and he's collected all the information you did, and here's his actual tabulation screen today. Now, it's a good point. This doesn't include any of the results from yesterday. So yesterday was one piece of data, and now this is new data. Now, what you can see here is clearly there was some movement towards the option one, the entertainment arts complex. And either the financial issue became clearer, the policy choice became more attractive, or we just have a different selection of people. We don't really know, but we know we went to about a half to now a very significant plurality favoring of the first option. So Mike, let's go to the public use. Now, one thing, again, keep in mind, much to my amazement and contrary to what I asked you to do, you still didn't use the whole site. We'll show you at the end. You got a few more inches of space filled up, but you've still got a couple acres left. But now this is the distribution of your public uses. And as you can see, it's a somewhat more reinforced, but fundamentally not a lot different than what we saw before. A lot of strength behind a flexible event space and a small music venue. You know, I think sort of dead even between, is it a 1 acre park, is it a 2 acre park? There's a very strong sense, virtually everybody here, that there should be a meaningful park. It shouldn't be 4 acres. It shouldn't be a half acre. It should be, you know, an acre, acre and a half, 2 acres. It should be a significant park. Some support for a rehearsal space, educational and maker, and then, you know, everybody's vote counts, everybody's opinion means something, but not a significant number of people supporting a fine art museum or an experimental museum or the large 4.5 acre park. It's like a rock and roll. No, I'm sorry. Is it experiential? Maybe the same thing, but this is experiential. Maybe it's an experiment with an experience. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, this is a little harder to read because the software doesn't automatically rank it like it did for the public uses, but you see the raw counts. You know, not an overwhelming majority, but a meaningful majority are still there for the boutique hotel. Meaningfully less support for a larger hotel. Not much support at all for residential or office. And then a desire, in some cases, for maybe a cluster of small offices, certainly a destination restaurant, and then a lot of people wanting, you know, 2, 3 cafes or small restaurants. You know, I think I'm accurately reflecting. I hope I am. There's a sense I think this should be an active place. You know, it's not selling clothes, it's not dry goods, it's not a pharmacy, you know, it's not a Gap, it's not Urban Outfitters. It's a place to, you know, have entertainment. It's a place for food and beverage. It's a more active, public, community kind of entertainment place, which obviously will go very well with the entertainment and cultural uses that you also envisioned for the site. Okay, so now let's go to money. Go back to funding gap. This is where you went. A lot of people want a capital fundraising campaign. That's going to have implications. It's a hard thing to do. It's unusual for capital fundraising to give money directly to a governmental entity. Not unprecedented. Annenberg is an example. but it's extremely unusual. You know, a sense of some kind of a general obligation bond, and then the annual contribution. For some reason, there's still 5 of you who want the option 1 and don't want that ticket tax. I don't know why you've done that, but there's still 5 of you who've chosen the option and deliberately chosen not to have a ticket tax. Maybe in your comment you'll explain to me why, because it's mysterious, but you have your reasons. And then we have some money for philanthropy, for operations. Now let's go to, I'm going to show you a little bit more detail here, because this is one of those cases, you know, as the cliche goes, you can drown in a pool of water that's on average 2 inches deep. Averages can be very misleading. So if we look at the tough issue, which is the capital surplus, the average, you improve from about a $40 million average to an average deficit to a $30 million average deficit. But look at the distributions. Most of you solved it financially. And the average shows, because you've got some people at the far distribution of the spectrum, you know, one $187 million loss has a sobering effect on an average. So I think probably what we'll do is what people do in statistics, and don't take this personally, whoever this is, but there's a statistical term called an outlier. And if you try and produce an average that's meaningful, you basically ignore the outliers. So I think when we report this, the Civic Working Group, what we're highly likely to do is show the outlier, but then calculate it without the outlier, because the average is highly distorted by the presence of the outliers. So you did actually very, very well in coming up with a large number of plans that balance it, and it showed that for about half of you, maybe, actually I can't do all that math in my head, probably half or more have reached the judgment that this redevelopment of the Civic Center can be paid for by development on the site. So about half of you think it can, maybe a little more than half. I can't do the count quickly in my head. Mike, what's your sense? About how many people are at 0 or better? Can you run that number?
Not
Yeah.
in my head either.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say half is a pretty good.
Yeah, so it's about half of you, you're pretty evenly split. Between about half of you think, okay, there's a way you could imagine paying for the renovation of the Civic and the new cultural uses off the site, and about half of you don't. And for the Civic Working Group, that's an interesting piece of data. Now, if you go above, again, most of you are very close to break even. Virtually all of you solved for an operating, in fact, you've got an operating surplus here. Again, the outlier distorts the average. On average, you're about 300,000 down. But I think when we get rid of the outliers, we're going to realize that you've come pretty close to breaking even. Now, if we look at the land budget, which is the top right-hand column, you'll see that some of you, in fact, use the whole site. And then, again, we've got some averaging issues here. But some meaningful number of you still left some surplus land. But most of the people here, and that's one of the ways the statistics are a little funky, since the program wouldn't let you use too much land, it shut you down. There was no way for people who decided to budget 8 acres of land on 6 acres of possibility could average out those people who only picked 4 acres of land. So, you know, the software virtually guaranteed, I think, that we'd end up with this average below the total use. But I think it's clear that most of you have ended up coming up with something that uses most of the land. And then the parking numbers, again, we've got a fair amount of parking here. The park, of all the constraints we've got, and we've got a lot, parking is not one that's going to impede the ability of the citizens to get a use of the site that's consistent with what your wishes are. Financially paying for it's going to be, I think, one of the constraints, but we've certainly got enough space. Why don't we turn the lights back on? And we can get like lights. Okay, so we're going to do just two more things before we adjourn. Nina and her colleagues on the Civic Working Group are going to get a chance to make some comments and talk both amongst themselves and with you. And then there'll be a public comment period. If you want to participate in the public comment period, there are either on your tables these yellow slips, and you can give them to us, and we'll sort them in. So before we end, let me just repeat what I said yesterday. I want to thank, first of all of you who participated. I've done a fair number of these workshops over a fair number of years. This has been one of the most interesting and enjoyable. You've been great participants. One of the wonderful things about Santa Monica is it has so many people like you who, on a gorgeous day like this, will take time to come and give your thoughts to your community. I want to thank the city staff. As always, I have a particular bias in favor of the city staff, but you are blessed by a very talented and committed group of people who serve, your mayor and council and city manager. The Civic Working Group have been terrific to work for, and as always, I'm very grateful for each of the professionals who contributed to this. Sam Schwartz and company, John Kaliski and his team, Paul and Remy, Paul, where's Remy? Right here, who did just an amazing job. Tom, who was fabulous, and then Mike, whose team, and really thank you to all your team in Portland for doing all this. Did an amazing job. So thank you all. So let me turn it back over to Nina, and we hope we see you again on March 21st for the third of the 3 workshop sequence. What? A football.
Hello? You'll never hear me without electronic assistance. Thank you so much for participating, and especially you guys who came both days and showed that great commitment. I think this was an amazing exercise that really helped people see how hard it is to plan these projects, and makes me really grateful that I'm not a city council person who has to make these decisions. And I'm really glad that we got to do it, and I really hope that this raises the bar for public participation in the city for a lot of projects. I think the residents in Santa Monica will be a lot happier with decisions that do get made in the future when they participate at this high level. I also wanted to I won't reiterate, but I will second John Alschuler's thank yous to all of the staff and consultants who worked on this. This was really a monumental effort to break this new ground. So just so you all remember, you can go on our website, santamonicacivic.org, and enter your plans and revise them as much as you want for the next 2 weeks it'll probably be by the end of the day Monday, because obviously staff has to get in the office and make it happen, and they might need a few hours. Remember, you can revise your choices as much as you want, and however you leave it the last time, that's the one that will go on the record. So please share, tweet. Any of you who tweets, get tweeting. Let everybody know. Put it on Facebook. Put it everywhere. Send it to your friends. Get as many people as possible to enter their plans. So with that, I think we'll just move on to our public comment. So okay, and then we'll make our comments afterwards. So let's start with Jerry Rubin. And then just after Jerry, it'll be Mitchell and then Kevin Winston.
Again, thank you to everyone. It's been a great 2 days. I would like to just make a suggestion. It wasn't on the list and probably didn't need to be on the list, but along with all the other wonderful things for this cultural, artistic area, that we integrate some public art sculptures around where feasible and where possible, wherever it may be, either in a park or even more, that we do it abundantly. And I think that would add to the cultural and artistic ambience of this whole area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mitchell, Kevin Winston, and Simone Gordon.
Well, it's a good show. I like it. The only problem, I have a couple of issues with it. It's limited in the, it's kind of directional. In, for instance, when we have to fill it out, it's either or, profit or nonprofit. I don't see why we can't have it both ways. Well, I mean, you have to open up this place for usages, and there's, you're limiting it by either ors. The other thing that's really major is we all complain about traffic congestion. This is a city parcel. I think we have to set an example, given the train, which was purported to limit or alleviate traffic congestion. I think it's a real big issue, our environmental issues here. And like I say, we're always talking about congestion, but we're not going to help, and as an example, a city piece of land, to help resolve our traffic congestion by parking. Given, like I say, the mass transit, the parking lot across over here. So, this plan says that we have to have required parking because of the existing zoning. But given this plan so important, and that the city is now in the process of creating ordinances, that we should be flexible and make recommendations to the city to extremely limit parking here. And I suggest, commercial handicapped. So this whole plan is kind of directional for parking and limited usages. Thank you.
Kevin Winston, Simone Gordon, Phyllis Elliott.
Does this one work? Cool. Hi, my name is Kevin Winston. Thank you for having this for us, giving the community a chance to respond and give input and understand how the trade-offs work when you're deciding what to do with this space. I'm Kevin Winston. I run Digital LA and Silicon Beach Fest. What that is, it's a conference which attracts 2,000 attendees from Santa Monica, the rest of the city, and it's gotten some people to fly in from San Francisco and New York to come to this area, which is also nicknamed Silicon Beach because a lot of tech workers are here. There's a lot of young people moving here, developers, programmers, every day. We have several tech companies in the area. I've had this conference in Santa Monica for the past 3 years at some of the co-working spaces, including Cross Campus and a couple other places. But we're attracting so many people coming to the conference that we're kind of outgrowing the available space. There is no conference space that has parking nearby, that's close to restaurants, people to go eat at local restaurants on breaks. There's nothing like that in Santa Monica, which is too bad, because other conferences are moving to other locations within the city, to downtown, to Hollywood. And I like to continue to hold this conference in Santa Monica because a lot of the companies are here, but I just can't find the space. So I would love if this, one of the ideas would be to continue to use this space, or just to have some sort of space where there could be conference space, not the entire time because my conference is only one weekend out of the year, but during the rest of the year it could be used for entertainment complex, other things. And so ideally, if there was some sort of entertainment complex that could also be used for conference space, that would be ideal, especially if we were in this area with the 405 is nearby, the beach is nearby, 2 people can go on breaks to the beach. If there was some sort of maybe a center plaza with a fountain and some of the public art sculptures, maybe a little bit of grass area, a couple of restaurants nearby so at the conference breaks people can go there. Maybe a hotel to help subsidize will work out too, so people don't have to go, walk too far. But I think you can do it all. 10 acres is a pretty big amount of space, and so I would really just, see a mixed-use space that definitely does have some room for conferences as well as some light retail, maybe a boutique hotel to help pay for it. So thank you for public comment.
Simone Gordon, Phyllis Elliott, and Mike Salazar.
Hello, fellow Santa Monicans. So, growing up in a medical family, I always learned that you have to properly diagnose a problem before you can find, this is really close, a proper solution for it. So, given that in mind, there's 3 questions I have when it comes to the Civic Center. 3 criteria I think we should use before we decide on anything. First and foremost, does it generate revenue? Secondly, does it enhance Santa Monica's international brand? And 3, and most importantly, I think, is this something that the majority of Santa Monicans can get behind, residents and local businesses alike? In my view, it's important that this be privately funded and not have to come out of the city's general fund and compete with other essential city services like police and fire and libraries. Thank you very much.
Phyllis Elliott, Mike Salazar, and Andrew Hoyer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I apologize that I was not present for the earlier part of the event. I will certainly make a point of being here for the entire event in March. The Civic is an important facility that can be a vibrant center of activity for Santa Monica, but also part of the nature and identity of Santa Monica. And I thank you all for devoting the time and the resources in this project. I'm an opera singer with a day job. I've produced several operas at the Santa Monica Bay Women's Club. I'm also a board member of New Playwrights Foundation, which is Santa Monica based and is meeting in private homes, and produced an anniversary event at the library, at the old library, but hasn't really been in a position to produce, but would be glad to produce were conditions favorable. My comment is just a side interest that I hope will be kept in the plans as the plans develop with the input of all these other wonderful ideas. And that has to do with the fact that the city convened a meeting of Santa Monica arts organizations a couple of months ago. And these ranged from large to small, funded to unfunded, theater groups, dance groups, musical ensembles. The Santa Monica Symphony and Verdi Chorus were there. I was there. And there were certain concerns that all the organizations shared. One major concern is the accessibility of rehearsal space. It takes 6 weeks to 2 months to mount a production, and companies are driving all the way across town to try to find rehearsal space for as little as $50 an hour, which is beyond the means of most of the companies. They just don't have that level of funding to be able to spend that. It would be ideal, and was even requested, that the city provide some kind of rehearsal space that could be available to Santa Monica arts groups. And certainly, somewhere in this complex would be space for a couple of rooms that could be made available to the arts groups to ensure that they continue to thrive in Santa Monica. and please bring back the Santa Monica Symphony. I thank you for that.
Mike Salazar, Andrew Hoyer, James Sharma.
I just have some general comments. I wanted to echo the earlier statement about the either-or aspect of what we did this weekend, and that there's going to be public-private options that are going to mix most likely as we get further into this. The other thing is that I'm a little worried about the general direction of this, because this really was sort of the financial exercise in that sense, and the direction constantly was, make it pencil out in that sense and use all the acres. And I think there's some things that really should be, thrown into this, such as, the museum option. I picked it yesterday and at the end got rid of it just because the dollar gap was so huge. But the reality of a museum is that if, as was mentioned before, we're not going to build it on spec. It's going to come here with the finances, not only to build it, but also for the endowment of it. So that's going to be a positive dollar thing that we didn't really get in this exercise. And other things that were mentioned yesterday, such as if we move ahead with making the building a national landmark, the tax credits and also the option of the transfer of development rights, which gets to the issue again that we had today about not filling up the space. And one of the reasons I didn't fill it up is I made this comment yesterday, is that we have these 5- and 6-story options on some of the things that on the private development side, and that's just too excessively tall for this site. And I think the good thing is that by not filling in the site, that gives the ability to really make it more height appropriate, and which gets to the idea of we're trying to connect Main Street and not compete with it. And I think a lot of people chose the cafes and storefronts and things, and I really see this as an extension of Main Street. That's the opportunity to bring that up and not compete. And I would say also on the outliers, the issue was brought up about that. I think again the financing thing, without really looking at the options for the museum, I think having that excluded so much because the financial options we had with that, I think that should really still be considered. And just a general thing that we have to think about is how are we going to get to this site? And where is the public improvement money or the community benefits that are going to get people from the expo site on miserable 4th Street to be here, so we can actually take some of that parking and use something creative to lower that. So thanks. Thanks for everybody.
Andrew Hoyer, James Sharma, Mike Feinstein.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Andrew Hoyer. I'm the president of Santa Monica Mid-City Neighbors. I have a clarification first. I had a little math spasm earlier. I didn't have a $13.7 million annual revenue excess. It was only $500,000 in revenue generated, but I still came out with generating revenue. So I don't know how many else of you were generating revenue at the end of your exercise, but I was. And I did it with all low scale. I did not click a single option that said 2 stories. So I chose museums, I chose workspaces for artists, I chose the experiential museum for the kids, I chose the make space for kids. So trying to generate an educational and a cultural complex with then, I chose the small music venue, the adjustable music space to supplement this as a music space. So, and then I chose all of the storefronts and all of the restaurant options at their maximums. So you kind of create a little vital community where people will come to see a show, they'll hang out, they'll have dinner before, they'll have drinks after, There's the shops there. They might be coming down for the shops, etc. And I chose one small office. I would have chosen more small offices, but one was my only choice at 1 story. The next size office was a 2-story building, and I don't want any 2-story buildings here. How many locations are we going to give away our blue sky? So I specifically nixed any option like that. Now I heard in talking with some of the others, Mike Feinstein suggested some really great ideas. I know I generated in excess of parking space. Well, he suggested that some functions could be placed underground. Some of those artist working space, rehearsal space for opera, you could do sound studios underground. They would love to have a place where they're not going to be impacted by external sounds. So any of my excess parking, which I didn't even think to look at how much I had, could be used as a way to generate more funds, so more stream. Now, in talking with Phil, I chose option 2, and apparently everybody else sucked the lemon drop and took the first option, where we give our money away to a private developer, a private company to operate the place. And I spoke with Phil about this, and he tried to convince me of the wisdom of this choice, and that's how Pasadena does it. And that's the only thing I fudged on my numbers. I switched, and I took that choice, and I took the extra ticket tax. Well, what happened is I went from a deficit of 86 million, I'm the outlier, on our capital costs, and it dropped me down to 68 million on our capital costs. On the other end, though, I went from generating $500,000 a year to losing $200,000 a year. So that means $700,000 a year are going in somebody else's pocket. Now, I knew when I came down here for this weekend, when I read the little description about what this was going to be, I knew that this was the meeting where they were going to tell us that we have to sell our property rights to somebody else to develop and make all the money. So I knew that that's what it was going to be coming in here. So that's why I chose to come in here and stand my ground and say, no, I'm sick and tired of giving off our public property rights, the stuff we own as taxpayers here in Santa Monica, to somebody else to make the profits. So that is my key firm, and that's why I stuck, and that's why I'm the outlier. Again, I would have chosen a few more small offices, keep it low scale. And also, anybody who wound up with excess space that they couldn't really fill up because of the options, just assume that if you picked a park, well, guess what the rest of your stuff is going to be? It would make the most sense if you had a 1/4 acre left and you chose a 1 acre park and a 1/2 acre park, that you're going to get 1 3/4 acres of park. You know, what else are you going to fill it up with? Again, my small office would have been, if I had 2 of them, I would have been almost perfect. So I think all we need to do is kind of work on the capital. And there are plenty of wealthy individuals in this city and in this nation who could be footing this bill if they hadn't been screwing the public for so long. So Michael Dell in particular is screwing this city out of $1 million every year. Someone told me that it's fiscally irresponsible of him not to take every option to earn money for his shareholders. That may be true, but it is morally reprehensible. So I'd just like to end with that. Thank you.
James Charmant, Michael Feinstein, and Denny Zane.
Hi, my name is James Charmat, and I'm a citizen of Santa Monica, and I'm just doing open research and participating in the civic process. I was a little disappointed on, well, first of all, I had a great time. This was fun. But I was a little disappointed on the scarcity of funding resources. The first time through, I was breaking open everything because I wanted everything to have an exit strategy, you know, having multiple things going on here. Then I saw the majority of people wanted the entertainment arts complex, and I was, yeah, sure, I'll go with it. And I'll do my little village left with the public space and the private space. But I wanted to break it up because I wanted as much public-private equity financing to break up our responsibility. Okay, so I came in about $28 million shy on capital. But I came in about 400,000 plus on the black on operating. But there is got to be about $25 million locked into the auditorium in the form of tax credits and landmark stuff that you could most likely get some sort of hedge fund or limited partnership to buy the tax credits to get the $28 million I need to be balanced. Thank you very much. I just think that this audience could have digested more funding options. Thank you.
Mike Feinstein, Denny Zane, Larry Skew.
So I want to thank my publicist, Andrew Hoyer, for speaking about the undergrounding issues I had brought up. Just to follow up on that, it does seem like recording studios that were underground that didn't bother anybody might be interesting to learn more about and whether there's revenue coming from them. Part of the reason I wanted to think about which uses could go underground is simply to maximize the open space, and I'll come back to that in a second. Just briefly, what I saw was, and it wasn't included necessarily in the model, but the office space, if there is office space, should be related to the entertainment uses, complementary, not just broad office space. And I think probably most of you feel that way. I felt the same way that if there was to be any ground floor retail on Pico, similarly, it should relate to the entertainment uses. If we did have that kind of office space there, that would also help if there's a restaurant on site, because we're not necessarily going to have entertainment going on all the time, and probably provide a little bit more foot traffic. In terms of the financing, I would like to work with your esteemed chair to possibly schedule a woman named Ellen Brown, who is the preeminent expert on public state banks in the country, lives in the Santa Clarita area, and she's studied North Dakota State Bank, and whether this becomes a project, a test project for a California state bank or a municipally owned state bank. In North Dakota, the lending costs are 30 to 50% lower when we're loaning to ourselves instead of giving the money away to Wall Street. And it seems like a portion, I came up with a $34 million gap. It seems like between the tax credits, the Bruce Cameron honorary TDR fund, and a public bank could make up most of that 30 million gap, and then we throw a few more into the bond. The question that wasn't asked here, however, that I think is really important to ask when we're asking people through these models are, do we want to set a precedent and tell the residents that once we think we have a community agreement on accepting a certain amount of development in exchange for open space, that 5 or 10 years later, we're going to go back on that agreement? Because when this community planning process goes back to 1988. That's when John Jalili convened the first planning meetings for the Civic Center. And when we agreed ultimately on the layout that had Tonga Park going over there, and in '99 when the council bought the Rand land, it was specifically to take the density that we put in the village, was in agreement that we'd have the open space here. The community accepted a lot of density on Ocean Avenue and essentially agreed to extend downtown type heights and densities towards Ocean Park, which we really necessarily hadn't bought into in the past, if this corner was open. And there was a back and forth between people who wanted the corner for open space and for arts, and the open space people won then, and now we're seeing it move towards the arts, and I'm willing to make some sort of compromise there. But when we're looking at the finances here, and hopefully, Phil, especially you'll push this, we need to think about what are the acreage costs to buy new land to meet the over 100-acre shortfall we've identified in our open space element, because we will gain that money and not have to use general fund money or a bond in the future to meet that capital need if we use some of the space for that. So it's not a cost, it's also a benefit gaining that. But if we're going to really aggressively develop the whole corner, we will have been telling the residents, ha, you took that development over there because we promised you open space, and now we're gonna go back on that later. So I'm open to compromise here, but part of the reason to put it underground, some of the uses, is to minimize the loss of open space as much as possible, because it will be going back on a promise we made to the community.
Denny Zane and Larry Skew.
Yes, I came here in part because I was worried about the prospect that the formulation of a plan here might presume the need for generating its revenue all on site, and thereby to over-commercialize the site in a way that I thought would be inimical to our community's interest. I'm comforted that there was less of that than I had expected. I don't see the Caruso project here that had been referenced in some newspaper reports. Not that Caruso doesn't do wonderful projects elsewhere. It's just not the sort of retail center that we have plenty of retail centers. We don't need that more here. So I'm comforted by that. Having said that, it does still seem to me that the process and the options skews our financing choices, our funding choices toward on-site development unnecessarily. They may be good choices as well, but there are other choices. So for example, cap and trade money from the state of California could be used to underwrite the cost of, say, affordable housing so that a much larger share of any housing on site than 10% could be affordable. Or there could be, you could avoid market rate housing altogether. Secondly, there are options like the why combo that the council placed before voters and was approved, $12 million a year. And that combo is a 50% measure, not a 2/3 measure. And it's done by having two measures, one of which creates the revenue, the other which creates the plan, which is advisory. That kind of measure is a far more reasonable prospect than, for example, a capital bond that needs 2/3 vote, which then begins to look like, well, we can't do it. I also think that that it is wrong and unfortunate to presume that city-generated revenue of other locations cannot be redirected towards supporting this site. So, for example, the 4th and Arizona project that's been talked about, whether it's 12 stories or 9 stories, all that's to be worked out, will generate very significant land rent revenue and likely very significant TOT. For example, at the 12-story deal point, it's about a $50 million capitalization of the land rent, half of or more of which could come to this site. The hotel proposes about $6 million a year in TOT, half of which or more could be directed toward capitalizing both operating and capital on this site. We do not need to see this site as having to contain both its revenue and its uses. We are a city of 8 square miles. There are other choices, and those are policy choices. And I think that those choices should have been on the table as well. I would like to say that I am disinterested in having the Civic Center site be thought of as a sort of world-class destination, international, what have you. I think if we think of our community and serve the community better, we will in fact do a better job of making it attractive to any traveler from anywhere in the world. I know when I travel, rarely, it's really to go where people live and to see how they live, enjoying them, rather than trying to create, some sort of theme destination. So that's my comments.
Larry Skew. Skews. I can't tell if it's a C or an E.
Last but not least, I hope, I'm Reverend Dr. Larry Skews, PhD. I come from this from a different standpoint. I think the thing is how to get revenue from certain sources. I'm a senior editor of a magazine. You can utilize mine if you want for publicity. And number two, I'm also work with a production company. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Governor Brown just signed a $100 million thing to keep that we have a problem here. We're a national, international place for film and TV, and there's so many hoops where including us, we leave here. We need something to keep people here. I think this should be used for TV and production to shoot films here. And also the way to get your money back is to go ahead. Well, first of all, I don't know if you've ever thought about Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or other funding sources. But if the people shoot the things here, and this is a landmark, this is an international place, to go ahead and charge a certain amount from the gross from them. Either way, you'll make your money back. I strongly believe in generating income, and I'm also a person who thinks of utilizing both public and private. But I don't know if any of you know, there's a lot of creative things going on right now with crowdfunding. You should try to be open-minded in using these other funding ways to where we can save money and not have to take the taxpayers. Don't get me started about the bus stop things that suck, okay? Don't get me started about that, okay? That $8 million, what a waste. Anyway, that's my opinion. You should think about utilizing it for shooting TV and film. And I'm biased. I do have my own production company. So anyway, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was a pretty good public comment session. I learned a lot. So let's hear from the Civic Working Group members. And they want me to start at that end this time, although we're in a different order than yesterday. Okay.
Well,
We have soft voices in this group.
Well, again, thanks everyone that showed up for the second day. It was a great participation. I know that I experienced a much lighter and more productive table today than I did yesterday. I think the intimidation disappeared and everybody had more fun with it. And I think the outcome is really great. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Obviously, thanks again today. I think this piece of software we're using might be a template for the future. It seems to work for everyone, to get everyone very engaged. One thing I wanted to say quickly, because I am working on a couple of historic buildings, usually around once per meeting, people mention the historic tax credits as a possible kind of white knight source of financing. I think just to put it into context, if the building was on the National Registry, it would get about it is a 20% tax credit. And that, I believe, would be only on the hard costs. And so let's just call this project a $100 million renovation. That'd be about $20 million of tax credits. And let's say hard costs are, maybe 70% of the budget. And so let's take that down to 15. And then when you monetize that, because the city can't take a tax credit on the federal level, you'd have to monetize that in an open marketplace and discount that even further of what the cash value is. So I think you're dealing with an amount of money that might basically just be a contingency on what people find as they start to dig into this building. So I don't think it's a real source. I think it's just a nice little cushion that could be considered. But I just want to be careful that people don't assume that these tax credits are going to be the overall solution to the problem. So I just wanted to throw that out there for my personal experience. So hopefully it's helpful.
Phil just proved what Nina said, that every speaker added to our level of knowledge. So thank you very much. And thanks to all of you again for coming or coming for the first time this weekend. Certainly at my table, there was a lot of improvement in understanding of the concepts, the nuances, the choices. So I think the final result of our folks was a richer and more accurate representation of their views and preferences. So you've given us a whole lot of stuff to review, talk about, debate, and include in our final thinking. Thanks.
Hi. I also want to thank everybody. It was, I thought, a terrific workshop and really points the way for a future public process in Santa Monica for major projects where it really gets people into the mindset of the decision makers have to happen. So I think they make more intelligent choices all down the line, and the feedback that we're going to get, because this is not the end of the feedback, I think we'll be informed by that and get a lot better. So I just want to say a few things. I took some notes down. I was fascinated. We had a great group of people at the table yesterday and today, and I did do a thing. I put it on, I was told by Mike I could put it on Friday's schedule so it didn't skew the results, but I did play the game, and I think it was extremely interesting, and a couple concepts. The first thing I want to say, I just want to remind everybody about our group here, the CWG. I always get the exact charge from the City Council wrong, but fundamentally, the way I see it is our job is to save the Civic. Personally, I'm extremely agnostic about how that happens. And I think most of the people here are the same way. We won't necessarily be able to solve every problem in Santa Monica, but we hopefully will come up with something, alternatives that the City Council can use to save the Civic, hopefully make the neighborhood improve it too. Then I want to say is the idea that there's a problem with the financing, particularly the capital costs. I think most people were able to make the operating cost work okay, even without the $1 million subsidy from the city. I know I was. But hardly anybody, I think, was able to make the capital costs work without the $50 million bond, which at 2/3 is extremely problematic. 20 years ago, I was like the Secretary of Treasury or something of the bond issue for the public safety building, and that didn't get 2/3 in Santa Monica. I mean, the police and fire couldn't get 2/3. So it's not easy to do that. So unless the legislature puts it down to 55%, or we could do like Denny Zane suggested, a Y and Y type YY, it's extremely difficult to put that money into the mix. But it shouldn't be a surprise because the ULI study said this. When we had that ULI thing, whether it was 18 months ago, they looked at all these hotels and stuff like that and said it's not going to work. It's not going to pencil out. You don't really have that. So I think it shouldn't be a surprise. And we cannot expect that development on the site, certainly, is going to solve the problem. Maybe there's a air rights thing like Bruce Cameron was talking about, and again, the 4th and 5th in Arizona. Maybe there are things like that. But it's not reasonable to expect that development on the site is going to do this job. And in any case, the development has to be justified on its own terms. We have 3 hotels right around here. Do we really want to add another hotel, boutique or not? I mean, do we really want this to be a hotel district? Maybe we do. But that's, to me, is a separate question. It can't be decided, because that capitalizes our problem. We need what works for the location. I personally love these 3-4 blocks, not the way they are, actually. I look back to the way they could have been if the neighborhood had grown up with it organically when the old Belmar Triangle was here, and this would become 3 of the nicest blocks leading up to the beach in all of Southern California. And I want to see these blocks improved, but so there is going to be, I do think there should be investment, but it's got to be the right type. Now, I think that what we have to be thinking realistically, looking at these numbers, is that we have to be expecting to bring a partner in, whether that's a nonprofit partner. I always fantasize about the LA Phil wanting to take the thing over and turning it into their West Side venue, or the Metropolitan Opera coming in and wanting to have a California location. I don't know. But the point is, it could be a nonprofit. It could be a profit. It could be like with that King's Hotel in Brooklyn that they were talking about. That was Ace Theatricals that came in and put $40-some million in. But we have to be thinking that unless we're going to do this in a generalized city subsidy, we're going to need a partner. We're going to have to make the thing attractive to partners. And a partner's not going to come in if the partner's being told by the city exactly what they have to do. We have to be willing, if we're looking at a partner, to create a program that attracts a partner. And a lot of that is going to be giving up control. And that's going to be really hard for people in Santa Monica. But you got to think about, in those terms, who are you going to trust to come in? Who would you trust to come in? You say, these are the parameters, and will you make them work? So I think we have to be thinking a lot like that. I want to say some I want to respond a little bit to Mike Feinstein. Hi, Mike. This goes back to Mike Mike and I first met each other on the OPCO board 20 years ago. The Civic Center plan that Mike talked about he was accurate, that there was a compromise, that the park was supposed to be over here because the development was over there. But the development over there that was approved by the voters included 450,000 square feet of development that was not built. 200,000 square feet of Rand offices that could have been built, and 250,000 of either spec office or housing. When the city bought the land from Rand, that got reconfigured. Much more park was built over there, much less development. I'm not saying that we put 450,000 feet of development here, but let's just make sure we have the history correct on this. That's how that came down. Okay, the last things I just want to say are a few comments about the program, which I think is fantastic. It's going to revolutionize all sorts of stuff. But I think it would have been really great to have an option for the parks rather than have to pick half acre, 1 acre, 2 acres, 4 acres, is just to give people a number, how many acres of park they want. Because I know I hit mine, I ended up wanting to get 1.5 acres. So that made a half-acre park and a 1 acre park. But what I really would have liked to do is just put 1.5, and then it doesn't show up on the graphs as two people picking a half acre and an acre park. So that would have been good. I think it would be great to have a factor. This is all for future stuff. I'm not, expecting anything. Great for a factor for the retail on the ground floor. Because I found myself, if I picked a housing thing, which I like housing, it had retail on the ground floor, well then why did I have to pick retail for something else? I should be able to balance those out. And then a technical thing, if we could have a summary page, if you could click on something that could show you all the choices that you made up to that time, I think that would be really helpful. And if we could get that for our own data sets, if instead of the averages, we could get printouts of what all the different solutions were that people came up with, I think that would be very helpful for us. Because, as I said before, this is not a vote, it's ideas. And I think the people up here, if we could see 80 different packages of ideas from yesterday and 40 different packages of ideas from today, I think that would be extremely helpful. And then the last thing about it's a detail. I think we should be able to have a parking pricing input, but that's a technical thing. Anyway, I know I spoke for a long time, but this was such a great session that I just took a lot of notes, and I thank you very much.
The website Movato calls us the smartest suburb in the United States. And I think we really had a great brain trust today of people working on some great programs that were designed to us to come up with some great solutions. And not only did we have some inside-the-box solutions working with the programs, but also all the speakers and all of the input, we've gotten some great outside-the-box solutions as well. And hopefully we're going to be able to come up with something that will satisfy the largest possible number of people. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to get in the middle of Mike and Frank right now, so I'll leave that alone. I think the template that was given to us for the tool that we used the last 2 days is a valuable tool. No, it doesn't give us all the potential choices we could have within renovation, change of this potential entertainment cultural arts district. However, I think there are some points that are clear and some points that were reinforced from the September workshop. People still want park space in this, we want open space in this facility, in this area. I heard yesterday from many people at the neighboring tables that they definitely want Samuel High's Greek Theater, Barnum Hall, and this area included in a more overall plan. And I think one of the solutions is to really work with the school district on the parking solutions, on renovation of the Greek Theater, renovation of Barnum Hall. Those choices weren't provided as part of this, but I think you have to look at the overall district and not just this facility. And I'm going to commit heresy for a couple of minutes, all right, which I do often. Since Frank expounded, I'll expound a little bit too. You know, the facade of the Civic and the terrazzo lobby is landmarked. And I know the movable hydraulic floor of the Civic is landmarked. But a majority of the renovation costs to the Civic starts off with complying with current ADA and seismic renovations to the building. And the heresy part is, I wonder if we should be doing that, or if what we're really trying to do is create a community cultural arts space that we can use. And does I'm going to really commit heresy, because does the mundane back of this facility and walls of this facility, does that really merit saving at double the cost of what we could do with something new and innovative? And that, for Nina, is going to kill me. But
Landmarks are 360 degrees.
But the point is that I think we need to have that discussion. And I think that's part of the discussion that we need to have, is not just block off and say, well, this is sacrosanct, but look at what could be done here to make something that's really workable for the people of the city. And Denny Zane said something which I loved, which is our residents first. If we design something that's great for our residents in the city, then others will want to come. But we need to design facilities that are good for Santa Monicans. And I think that's important. So those are a couple of things. Mitchell talked about parking. And Mitchell, I know, hates parking and wants everyone to bicycle everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, and I think, you know, we're planning on 3 floors of underground parking. I think if you combined underground parking on the track stadium area and baseball stadium area at Samo High, ran under 4th Street, you could reduce the parking that's 3 floors planned to 2 floors, which would also reduce the cost per parking space and would simplify what we need to do with storm drains, et cetera. So I think there are more ideas that aren't contained within the tool that should still be talked about. But the tool is a good start, and the tool provides our Civic Working Group and later the City Council with some statistical analysis that will allow us to see a general direction. I didn't see anyone say, wait, I want a 20-story hotel. Thank God that got eliminated from the tool. I noticed that I don't see anyone saying we want high-rise office buildings in this lot. I heard Andy say, look, I want 1 stories. I want open space. So I think we see a direction, and the direction we can then refine. And look, all of you will have months, years to help refine this further. We've been doing this for 20 years, 25 years.
Let's not do it for another 20.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, Tom and everyone else, and Mike and everyone else who's been involved with this process for years, we need to come to conclusions that will work for our residents and will make this a vibrant area that is indeed a link between Main Street, the promenade, and a destination for our residents to come to, a place that our residents come through both day and night. Thank you.
Thank you. I really want to thank everyone who came and participated. I mean, the input and just hearing and seeing what you all gave us has been highly instructive. I would also second that I'd like to see at least something in our graphs or what we see, not just the aggregates and averages, but really maybe there's a way to sort of see what 80 people or all the people put down so we could see what their full plans were to sort of, because I think it's in the whole, everybody put so much thought into creating a whole plan. It'd be good to sort of look at the whole plans as opposed to how it, how people sort of put it together. I really want to encourage everyone to get any of the people you know to play with this over the next 2 weeks. I think the input is so helpful, and getting more and more people on board will also help people to feel as if they had a voice in what we did and what we're doing here, and allow them to commit fully, because we're going to need that commitment if we're going to actually get this done. So I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate how not only the tool gave us the ability to look at what was allowed in the tool, but really opened up other ideas, and I think that's going to be very helpful for us and for the council to make decisions. And lastly, I'm a bit of a heretic also, sorry.
Let's not. Well, I love this group, I have to say. We've been working on this for a long time, and we started out with a list of givens, one of which was the landmark Civic Auditorium. Most of you probably know I was a landmarks commissioner for 12 years, and this was actually the very first thing that we designated, my very first meeting when I joined the commission, so I have very special feelings for it. That said, I just want to remind everyone that this exercise really helped, I think, all of us see the hard work that council does. I said this in the beginning also, in figuring out these plans and solving these problems and creating these places for our city. And this exercise was not a vote, and we're not trying to reduce options. We're trying to, our job was to try to create consensus and run a public process and then bring back recommendations to City Council, who is still the decision maker on ultimately. And we are not the decision makers, and we haven't really discussed exactly what the format of our final recommendation will be, but it probably will not say we want choice Civic A and we want this part and we don't want this, and I don't think that's the kind of recommendation that will be useful. We've been through this so many times. We've put out RFPs, we've gotten limited responses, and really ultimately it will be the decision between council and the partner that comes forward to do this with us. And we need to all continue to stay involved in this process long after May, when the Civic Working Group is dispersed and the process moves forward, and with Community and Cultural Services and City Council leading the charge, because it's going to be a long road and a lot of decisions are going to continue to be made, but the foundation and the spirit of it will definitely have come from this process. And so we're going to do our best to make recommendations that will allow for the flexibility, that will bring in different kinds of funding options that Denny Zane came up with and that aren't on our radar right now, that, you know, making sure council thinks about other resources they have besides the general fund. And putting a rehearsal space underground or whatever it is, all of those little nuances are going to affect the bottom line, and we'll all come together as a whole in the future. So stay involved, participate, get everybody you know to give us ideas, to find that unique combination that we haven't thought of. I'm really looking forward to seeing each of the ideas as a whole, as my colleagues have requested, as well as seeing the overall bar graphs. And I hope to see you in March, and I hope you'll come to our regular monthly meetings as well, because that's really where we discuss all of this. I mean, we are planning these sessions at our meetings and asking for information and getting it, and people come and speak to us about things, and we learn a lot, and we distill it for you here. But those meetings, tell me again, they're the fourth Monday, fourth Monday at 6:30. I have my devices just telling me when to show up. I can't remember. In this spot right here where we are, fourth Monday, 6:30. So they are really valuable sessions because we really do talk about things in detail. Trail mix provided.
And I'll do my usual. I move that we adjourn.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Second, and vote.
Have a lovely day.